So, cross-platform apps in 20 minutes with Ionic and React. So how many times have I gotten people come up to me and say, hey, okay, so I have this app idea, and they're super fired up, they're jazzed up, they want to build it, but they want me to build it, but they want to build it because they're passionate about it, but there's no really place for them to go. A lot of the time, I can tell them they might start working on a project, but it's going to take a long time and a lot of money to build it. So generally speaking, I advise people starting in web because most people learning how to code have tried HTML, CSS, or JS before. And you can actually create cross-platform apps in web, so that's what I'll be demoing today. And it opens up a myriad of possibilities. So people often stop losing kind of their ability to code when they aren't sure what they want to make. So having this ability to create an app just from your kind of basic HTML, JavaScript, CSS knowledge is great. So it also helps you monetize as well. So that's a great thing. Yeah, so we'll be teaching Ionic Framework today, which is a runtime environment and a command line interface to package websites as apps. It deploys to browser, to simulator, and to hardware. And it supports React, Vue, and Angular. How many people are familiar with React in the audience? Pretty good number. Okay, great. And yeah, it's got a comprehensive native-styled UI toolkit as well. So that's something that's going to be super useful that we'll dive into. And also a plugin system for native code, which is super useful if you want to do something like use a camera or you know, do something more advanced. But we won't get into plugin systems in this round. Another cool thing actually is you can build and preview directly in the web browser. So you can see here something fairly complicated happening, which is an iPhone with a show action sheet button and code there that you can edit, where essentially any code that you're writing here will show up here. This type of like live coding environment is really super useful, but it's not something that you can normally get with just using Apple technology. So it's funny how web in this funny way has surpassed like native tech in terms of its accessibility. So let's talk a little bit about React. It's an extremely popular and well-supported front-end framework. And it's a coding paradigm based on reactions to changes in state, as Tristan was just getting into a bunch of state change stuff there with React. It supports high-performance applications, and it is created and maintained by Meta. Specifically, we'll be using functional components and hooks, which is the modern style of React coding. Also, we'll be using the Node Package Manager, which is a way of installing code packages, which allow you to reuse code easily. It allows you to install applications to your system as well. And it's required to use both Ionic and React. And for editing, Visual Studio Code, which is an editing environment that meets significant core needs when coding. Also, HTML, CSS, JS, the foundations of the coding stack. I'm also going to make recommendations throughout this talk, and at the end of it, I'm going to provide a link that has a bunch of different and great resources that I've found for this stuff. There's the learn.shayhow.com website. That's the best resource I've found on HTML, CSS. And this also leads into JSX, which we can touch on later. And yeah, this is just a screenshot of that website, which is glorious. So we're going to install NPM. I've already done that. I'm going to start with installing the command line for Ionic. So here, I'm going to try putting this down. So there's an Ionic app creation wizard. So we're going to actually build something called the Vulkan Times. This is based off of my friend's project. She's a Mayan astrologer. So we're going to learn a bit of Mayan astrology today. We'll just set the color to be yellow. We'll use the list layout template and React. And so this is going to build into the terminal. I had a previous project called that, but I'll overwrite it. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the Vulkan while this builds. It's a glyph and divination system. The content is graciously provided by the Vulkan Times 2.0 Shannon. And it provides a nice source of imagery, systems, and timing and text for more to base an app on. So the way the dream spell works is that every single day has its own interpretation. And there's 260 days in this calendar, divided into 20 groups or seals of 13. Don't worry if you forget all this stuff. I'll just explain it quickly. For each of the 20 seals, there's a name, a glyph, and a meaning. So red earth, or white mirror, or blue monkey, or yellow seed. Each seal is also associated with a 13-day-long wave spell. So this is all the different seals. They'd have names to them as well, but that picture doesn't have it. And so for each of the 13 days in a seal, there's a name as well. That's called a tone, so magnetic, or lunar, or electric, or cosmic. So each day is named based on combining its seal and its tone. The red cosmic earth, the white magnetic mirror, or the blue electric monkey. Each day has an ally, a guide, a cult, and a challenge. So there's sort of this little layout here that we'll build into our UI. And the Vulkan Times gives these long readings, sort of saying the day and talking about the guide and the cult and the challenge and everything, and kind of gives you a little perspective on life that you can have if you follow this system. So she usually includes a graphic with it as well. So at this point, we should be able to return to the terminal and see that our app has built. It has. So if I type in Ionic serve, this is what will start up the Ionic server, and we'll run something. Several previous versions of it. Okay, so we have our app running now. And what I'm going to do is make it look, this is ultimately going to run, intended to run as a iPhone app, which we'll do later. But right now we'll just run it in the web browser for efficiency. But we'll just make it look like an iPhone. So here, I'll actually move it over so I'm not in the way. But as you can see, it looks more like an email client right now. So this is just something that Ionic created that was kind of like a default template. But I figured that was just a great place for me to start, that I could kind of live code an app for you so you could see how quick it could come together. So if I open this up in Visual Studio, if I go in and I start taking a look at the code that is generated, I can kind of pull up a number of different areas which are interesting. For example, the home page. And so I want to create something that looks more like my friend's project than an email client. So I'll move a little bit more. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the name inbox to the Vulkan Times. So if I hit save, that should just run. It's like, you'd be surprised at how much work it is just to get something like that, like live reloading working. If you're not a coder, it seems like you should just make saves and things should change, but I can't tell you the number of projects I've worked on. You make a change, you hit a button, you wait 5 minutes, and then you see the change. So just having that type of feedback is really key to web development. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to jump in and start editing the data in here. So if I pull from the Vulkan Times, all I'm really doing here is just taking from what's given and playing around, right? And I think that's just such a great way to learn a system, is to see what other people have done. Yeah, so see, I just changed that. So now for ones that have descriptions, it's showing the description. This is going to still say lorem ipsum because I haven't gone in and done it here, which is a similar but different space. Okay, so now I'm going to remove that thing that says inbox. It's not going to an inbox anymore. Okay, so this is starting to shape up. You know, the idea of just being that my friend is publishing this daily content, and it's essentially every time I go to see it, I'm going into Facebook or something like this. So if I could create something for her that's, you know, got push notifications and that sort of thing, you start to see how something would take shape around this, right? I was going to dive into Ionic Grid, but I think I might be running out of time. So these are just kind of different checkpoints for where the app can go. So I'll just jump into a few slides and then try and build it to a simulator, and we can stop there. But one question would be, why not React Native, which is kind of the official meta fork of React that deploys to iOS and Android? I noticed that there's some significant differences from plain React, including a different UI language, which is missing the concept even of a grid, oddly. In my experience, it's simpler if you just use React directly, as React is more general and has greater support. So Ionic's really nice because it's giving you vanilla React, but on a phone. And Ionic handles a lot of the missing functionality as well that's missing from React for mobile devices. Yeah, so I was going to get quickly into the Ion Grid. It's a simple solution that works. You'd be surprised at how long it's taken web developers to figure out grids, because there was Bootstrap, but when you were on a phone, it would just condense the grid into a list for some reason, making it not a grid. So it's been around for a long time, but it's taken a long time for them to get it right. But here we are, and it's 2022, and we have a grid. And this is the nuances of coding to anyone who hasn't coded before. It's a lot of just weird idiosyncrasies, but this was the ultimate kind of completed proto app where it's just showing you the guide, the ally, the challenge, the day, the occult as well. And I'll just jump to the Xcode, Capacitor, and Cocoapods. So if you want to actually build this to a device, then you need to use Xcode, which is here. And what you end up doing is you use something called Capacitor, which is used with Ionic to generate an Xcode project from Ionic code. And also it uses something called Cocoapods, which is another thing like NPM. It's a package manager. And you have to use that to install project dependencies afterwards. So there's documents for that. It's more complicated than you wish it was. But there you go. That's life with this stuff. Because Ionic kind of gives you a bunch of stuff out of the box, I think you would lose if you were just doing it more manually. Just like, for example, this capacitor stuff right here. So if I go ahead.
Can you deploy Ionic apps to the App Store?
Yep.
Right, so you can't do that with the PW, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this just generated an Xcode project, which has a pod file. So I have to run pod install. Pod, who would have thunk? Now that that's installed, if I just open where I am, open the app.exe workspace, and I choose iPhone 11, and I hit build. One of the things I've noticed about Ionic actually sometimes is it takes a while to load. Oh, will it load on the simulator? Law of demos.
At least you had Xcode already installed.
Yes, it's true. Huh. There. Oh yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it's just slow to load. Yeah, no, this is the right project too. So yeah, so it's a little bit hard to see with this projector, but this is running in a iPhone simulator. So what you saw in the web browser also runs on the phone. Thank you. Yeah.